The Retirement Cafe podcast, a retirement well spent. Lessons from 4,000 weeks with Oliver Burkeman. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Retirement Cafe podcast with me, your host, Justin King. If you're thinking about your retirement or already retired, you're in the right place. My aim is to help you plan for and live a successful and meaningful retirement. Retirement is far more than just a financial event. It's a significant life event, a major transition, which will bring with it new challenges and opportunities. So each episode contains tips, information, and inspiration to help you feel more informed and confident about your retirement. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Welcome to the Retirement Cafe podcast. Today I'm thrilled to have with us a guest whose work has profoundly shaped the way we think about time, productivity, and living a meaningful life. Oliver Burkeman is a renowned British journalist, author, and former columnist for The Guardian, best known for his groundbreaking book, 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals. I love this book and honoured that Oliver joined me to share his story and research, and to introduce his latest book, Meditations for Mortals. 4 weeks to embrace your limitations and finally make time for what counts, which has sparked a global conversation about the finite nature of our lives and how we can make the most of our limited time, especially as we enter the later stages of life. So here's my conversation with Oliver Burkeman. So welcome to the Retirement Cafe podcast, Oliver Burkeman.
Thanks very much for inviting me.
Well, Oliver, it was great to hear you talk at Nudge Fest, the conference that I was an attendee of the other week, through a friend of mine, Rory Sullivan, and he'd obviously invited you to come and talk, and you were there to talk about time and your great book, 4,000 Weeks, which I enjoyed a few years ago. And I understand you've got a new book, so I'm really excited to talk about that as well. But for those of the audience who may not know you, tell me a little bit about yourself.
It's one of those questions I could spend 3 seconds or 30 hours answering, isn't it? I'll do neither of those. I'm an author and a journalist. I worked for a long time at the Guardian newspaper, where I wrote a column about self-help and productivity and happiness culture and all the rest of it called This Column Will Change Your Life. And I wrote a book on the problems of positive thinking called The Antidote. And then the book that you mentioned, 4,000 Weeks, about making the most of time as radically finite human beings, and my new book, Meditations for Mortals, very happy to talk about. Lived in America for a long time, live in the North York Moors in northern England now.
Wonderful. So, Oliver, time management, it's a massive thing. It's very popular. What got you into this space? What was the draw from you? What was the moment you thought, you know what, I need to write about this?
I mean, honestly, for me, except at those parts of my career where I've just literally been, a junior feature writer, so your job is to do what the editor wants that day. Whenever I've had any choice in what I'm writing about, I've always just been drawn, not always consciously, I think, to issues that I'm kind of struggling with, things that I want to know the answers because it would make my life better. Sounds pretty selfish when I put it in those terms, but fortunately it's turned out that lots of other people have the same hang-ups and issues as me. So really, time management and time was a focus that came out of this kind of question of what it means to build a meaningful life, what it means to try to sort of feel like you're doing enough in a world where there's obviously far too much to do, and it's unclear what even understanding what's going on can be pretty difficult. And it really struck me that time management, actually, if you really think about it, is a much bigger and deeper idea than we've tended to sort of file it away as, right? It's not just a question of how you schedule your work day, although it is that. It's life. It's like, how do you deal with the challenge of having a finite amount of time, both in a day and in a life, in a context where there are vastly more legitimate and useful and meaningful uses for that time than you'll ever manage to get. So this is to do. So this is just a long way of saying that it's psychotherapy in public for me, really.
Absolutely. But I was preparing for our conversation today, and I was sat there last night thinking, 4,000 weeks. I'm 54. Flip.
Don't do the maths. Never do the maths.
So I think your 4,000 week is kind of based on the average life expectancy across the world of being about 80. We all hope that we're going to be slightly better than average. I think the life expectancy in the UK is around about 86. Males and females are getting closer all the time. We hope that we're going to be better than average. But my audience for the Retirement Cafe podcast are mostly people preparing or in their retirement. Mm-hmm. And as they listen, and they may do what I was doing last night, going, oh, right, I've got 4,000 weeks. And that means there was a whole chunk of my life that was in childhood where our context of time is radically different, I think, from our adulthood, especially to my teenage daughters who seem to think that they're going to be ready on time and never on time. And the holidays last forever. And then all of a sudden they're over. The time frame, even the constructs are very different in your childhood. But as you get into your 50s and your 60s and your 70s, this narrowing of focus your book becomes more and more important, I think.
I hope so. But I think, I think one of the things I think it's important to say is I was very happy to sort of give my last book this kind of title, this sort of shocking title. People work out that 4,000 weeks is very approximately, and I rounded it down to a nice big round number, obviously, but very approximately the human lifespan. I think it gets people in the door. But the message and even more so the message of the more recent book, which is where my head is at the moment. I'm not just being blatantly self-promotional, but it's where my brain is much more, I think, to do with what it means to be finite, regardless, right? I think few people think in these terms when they're 18, 19, 20, as you suggest with the example of your teenage daughter as well. But actually, wherever you are in life, it is finite. The amount of time you have in a day is finite. Your limitations are your limitations. The difference between someone being 20 and someone being 90, when you set it against the backdrop of cosmic time, is kind of nothing, right? It's like we're all just here for a brief glimpse of it. And I think that it's actually kind of interesting. There are definitely people who, as they get older, into the second half of their lives and towards retirement, and then eventually see, death on the far horizon or getting closer, who get very stressed and panicked and afraid about it. But it's very common actually from the sort of midlife place onwards to become more and more peaceful about these facts and sort of reconcile to them. And what's so interesting about that, I think, especially in the context of retirement and your audience, is like that is not necessarily associated with a mindset of just passively waiting for the end of your finite years. That's actually something that can unleash a lot of motivation and power and energy, because you're no longer fighting this futile struggle to do everything. You actually have more energy and attention and focus to spend the present moment doing some things that actually matter. And I'm not very far behind you at all, years wise, and so I'm sort of in that sort of broadly understood midlife section. But when I look to people I know who are significantly older, I'm often really struck about how much they are doing, especially in the modern world, right? This idea like that retirement is about sitting in a chair is totally done with. But part of I think that goes along with a real awareness of finitude. So I'm always wanting to make the case that sort of being aware of and stepping into the truth of one's limitations is empowering, right? It's not about just freaking out and collapsing in a puddle on the floor.
No, No. So you mentioned where your head's at, of course, is your new book that I think hopefully launches this October. Is that right?
September in the UK, October in the US.
September in the UK. Yeah. We get it early.
Yeah.
Meditations for Mortals, 4 weeks to embrace your limitations and finally make time for what counts. Tell me more.
This is a book that addresses something that I've been it's been in the back of my mind for a long time, which is a lot of what I've written about, both in book form, journalistically, email, newsletter, and all the rest of it, is about this challenge of actually getting around to things, right? It's this idea of like not implementing systems and building habits so that one day you're going to feel like you're living a meaningful life, but actually doing those things right here and now. And of course, the finitude of life is very important here, because if you're 20, you can just about convince yourself that, like, you know, the really important part of life is coming later. But after 30, 40, 50, it gets harder to maintain that notion, right? And eventually the ground for doing things that matter has to be right now. So the book is sort of an exploration of this. It's kind of it's divided into 28 very short chapters, again divided into 4 weeks. So the sort of invitation, I can't make anybody do it, you know, but the invitation is to read one of these per day for a month. And the idea then is that these little perspective shifts, I can talk about some of the individual things that I bring in, but that they all sort of have this effect, I hope, of just very subtly maybe changing how you live through that 24-hour period. And as a result, by the end of that time, having kind of imbibed some of this spirit of what I call imperfectionism, a philosophy of kind of actually doing what matters now, not waiting for the right time in the future, to have sort of put that into practice almost without realizing it, right? Because the curse of self-help books that I wanted to try to oppose is that you read it and it's some great system. It looks absolutely brilliant. And you think to yourself, okay, I'll need a few weeks to really put this into practice. First of all, I've got all these things I've got to do. I've got visitors coming. I've got some travel. I've got some work. So, you know, maybe in a couple of months when I get a spare moment, I'll finally put this person's system into practice. And of course, no one ever gets a spare moment. There are no spare moments. And so I really wanted it to be something that could slide into people's lives, as it were, in the midst of everything that they have on their plates, which in terms of the retired people I know doesn't seem to be any smaller amount of stuff than the not yet retired.
No. In fact, the often complaint I hear from my retirees is that they're not sure how they ever found time to work.
Right. Yes, exactly.
So give me some ideas about, you know, what people can expect to find in this 28-day journey. You know, some of the key things that they can start to meditate on, maybe.
So in the first week, I sort of being pretty sort of philosophical and big picture about what it means to be a finite human, what it means that every decision to use a week or a lifetime for anything means not using it for a million other things. So you have to constantly make these decisions, make decisions about what to do in the context where all the other things you're not doing would have been good things to do as well. And that can be really an agonizing thing. I'm trying to sort of really get in people's faces in terms of the what it means to be finite. And then there's a week about taking action. So the challenge of making decisions when there's always too much to do, the challenge of the kind of tasks and responsibilities that we avoid out of fear and how to deal with that kind of avoidance, the way in which lots and lots of things that we consider to be incredibly challenging are actually a lot easier than we were expecting them to be, and how we make extra work for ourselves by sort of expecting any meaningful activity to be also difficult and effortful. How to deal with a sort of endless to-read pile of like thousands of books that you feel bad about not getting through all of them. Then I move on to a more sort of, I guess, Zen inspired week about the importance of letting things happen, of not always approaching life in this spirit of forcing things into being, allowing other people their emotions, right? Not worrying all the time that somebody is mad at you or that you're letting down somebody or disappointing somebody. Being able to sort of let those emotions be and live without being tormented by them. And then final week is all about, it's called showing up. It's all about just sort of the challenge of really sort of being immersed in the actual present moment life you have, not approaching life as something where you're storing up experiences or skills or earning qualifications or whatever it might be for some future moment when it's all going to be meaningful, but actually bringing that meaning out of the future and into the present. So there's a whole lot of little perspective shifts. There's a whole bunch of techniques and tools. And I just really wanted to try to sort of, as I say, let it get under people's skin in a way.
So when people are reading the book and working way through and they're becoming maybe more cognizant to relationships and community and skills they want to learn or travel they want to do, and they're going, this, I really want this wonderful, fulfilling, possibly retirement. How do you, or how does your book address helping them kind of prioritize the time they have available and the priorities that they have? Maybe there's a ladder of priorities, the things that they want to, often I can imagine, or I know myself, that there are a lot of things that I want to do, but actually getting those into a priority order of actually what I should attend to first in the finite time available. How do you help kind of, work through that?
I think prioritization is such an interesting angle on all this, because there is a lot of advice mainly aimed at sort of corporate life and working life, but I'm sure there's some of it in the sort of space aimed at retirees that treats prioritization as really a sneaky way to try to fit everything in. So it's not really prioritization at all. It's a way of saying, well, look, if you give these things a priority A and these a priority B and these priority C, and you do them in this order when your energy levels are at this or that, then you'll fit them all in. Of course, prioritization, in any real sense for any finite human, has to entail letting things go, like watching ships sail, right? And being able to say, I'm not going to see the majority of the places in the world that I yearn to see. I'm not going to develop a majority of the skills that I yearn to develop. But actually, that defeat, when you sort of surrender to that and see it for what it is not really a defeat at all. It's actually incredibly empowering, because that's the moment at which you can then allow yourself to really go into a handful of things, to really, get the marrow of the experience of a trip to, one of the countries you've always wanted to visit. But precisely because you're not sort of tormenting yourself with this idea that the real goal is to see all of them, and the real goal is to do all of those things. So I think it's really hard to describe what it feels like. And I'm not in this mindset like 100% of the time on every single day of the week or anything, but there is a real sort of way of getting purchase on life somehow. That's one of the best ways I've seen it described. You stop sort of floating on top of your life, trying to find some clever system for cramming everything in that you can think of. And instead you sort of plunge into the ones that you do decide to do. And this bit's crucial. You talk about which bits you prioritize, and implicitly, like, it's a question of, well, which of these world cities is really worth going to, and which of these is like, can I with regret skip because they're not quite so good. In the end, I think it's about seeing that there is not necessarily anything inferior about the options that you don't make time for. right? Like, if I can, maybe some of those places you're going to decide not to visit, some of those skills you're going to decide not to learn, some of those relationships you're going to decide not to nurture, maybe they're absolutely just as good as the ones that you're leaving behind, that you're focusing on, because that's just what it is to have finite time and finite attention and finite energy. And then you don't need to worry so much, right? Because there's not some little voice in you trying to persuade yourself that actually doesn't matter if you never see the pyramids at Giza. Like, it does matter, but unfortunately it's still going to happen that you don't see them because you want to go and visit your family in Australia.
Sure. So I like that. I like that a lot. The other, maybe I'm getting some self-help myself here, but the other challenge I feel is often when I'm sitting with a couple who are, we're transitioning into retirement, and I'm asking them hopefully some really deep questions, and I get them to, consider mortality, because I do find, this idea of mortality, this goes back to the Stoics, that this meditation on our infinite, finite life, does help us, create some kind of focus of living in the present. Though, of course, with a couple, we have separate dreams. And, what is on the priority list of one may not be on the priority list of the other. Mm-hmm. And obviously, there's an element of, first of all, making sure we share with our partners, mm-hmm. What is an ideal, fulfilling retirement like? But actually, I've had it before, I want to sail around the world, and the other partner goes, I'm not getting on a boat, So how would you, or maybe your book addresses this, this is maybe not just about being totally self-indulgent in your own priorities, but how you meld into the priorities of the people you love and care for as well. How do you think that you navigate that?
Yeah, no, totally. And I would say that I don't think these kinds of differences are confined to retirement, are they? Right? It's like it's one of the angles that I do explore in one of the chapters is this very empowering idea that your situation is worse than you think in all sorts of contexts. And one of them is the relational context, right? Because if you encounter some difficulty in a relationship, you might think, oh, maybe I married the wrong person, or, oh, maybe I need to do a lot of therapy before I can really be a good relationship partner. And those things might be true, but it's also just like, that's called being in a relationship. And part of that is, it's another expression of human finitude, that you can't ever fully understand what makes another person tick, even the people you're closest to, perhaps especially the people you're closest to, because in the cases of people you're not close to, you don't even let it bother you that they do things you don't understand. And you will get triggered, and your old childhood issues will come to the fore, and this is just called being in a relationship. Doesn't mean that there aren't relationships that people should leave, of course, and sometimes the only response to that kind of difference is a separation. But the idea that the good relationships are free of problems, I think, is a basic mistake, because problems is just another word for each of us coming up against our limitations of, emotional flexibility, our limitations of maturity, our limitations of understanding another person. So this is all a very long-winded way of saying that I think that for anyone who's in a relationship that ultimately, means a lot to them, whether it's a sort of smooth sailing or less smooth sailing one, the distinction between what you want and what the other person wants exists, but it's a little bit different than meets the eye, because actually what you want for yourself and your own personal growth, if you're in any way committed to a relationship, is to become more flexible and more capacious and more willing to find some enjoyment in what the other person enjoys, and they to you as well, right? So that sort of act of constant yielding and sacrifice is sort of the name of the game rather than an inconvenience. That's a very sort of therapy level or philosophy level response. There's also obviously the very practical one, which is like, we've got this amount of money for our summer holidays. I want to go to one place, you want to go to another. And I don't think there's a one answer to that kind of challenge. I think that the attitude that I was just talking about, the one that says like disagreements and difficulties and tensions are like part of the interesting experience of being in a relationship, means that you'll then be better able to make ad hoc decisions. Maybe sometimes the really interesting path forward would be for you to put your interests to one side and really try to enjoy something that your partner enjoys. Maybe another time it would actually really be the thing that was calling on you was to sort of stand up for yourself and say, no, this time I really want to persuade you to do what I want. And maybe sometimes people should go on separate holidays. Absolutely fine as well, right? No, not a sign of anything bad if it comes from that place. But a big part of the philosophy of imperfectionism that I'm trying to outline in this book, I use that label imperfectionism just as a sort of umbrella term, is like, once you stop expecting these kinds of problems ever to be completely resolved, they're not really problems anymore. They're just life, and they're quite interesting and absorbing and motivating even.
Yeah. So you touched on the cost of a holiday, for argument's sake, and I think again, the way our world works, of course, is that, as you rightly say, we've got a finite time and we spend our time. But of course, how we choose to spend our money, when we don't know how long we're going to be around, is a huge challenge.
Yeah.
Gone mostly for most of the UK are the days of guaranteed pensions. Obviously we get a state pension if we've got full entitlement to that. And the current, the classic thing that I struggle with, or my clients struggle with, is at what point do we spend the money?
Right.
and how much do we spend? And we're terrified of it running out.
Yeah. And
therefore can end up with lots of money at their death,
right,
and not have prioritized the thing, so there's a whole conundrum here, isn't there? And then, do I leave a legacy? And do you have any kind of wisdom about how you could look at that?
It's totally fascinating because, yes, there is exactly that. There's the problem of running out of money when you still need it, but there's also the problem of having spent so much of your life creating these resources that you then never benefit from because you were saving them. And I do a little bit in the book, not really in that context of retirement funds, I guess, but look at this question of the necessity of deferring gratification and the risk of deferring gratification too much. And in my experience, the kind of people who are interested in this material, the kind of people who resonate with my work, who think a lot about these topics, are significantly more in danger of deferring gratification too much than they are of not deferring gratification. There are definitely people who need to stop spending every single pound that comes into their life immediately on drink and drugs, right? But there are also lots of people who are like thinking so much about the future that it, in an anxious way, that it detracts from the present. Honestly, I'm one of them to some extent. I don't claim to have got past any of this stuff completely, and I think I'm definitely susceptible to that sense that I'm so afraid of running out of money when I really needed it that that I would like deny myself or my family something that would just be, in this year of our lives, a good thing, and always will have been a good thing. Obviously, and you're much more an expert on this, there are all sorts of judicious ways of approaching this and thinking about risk and investment and all that, and that's not my domain. But I do think it's important to understand, harking back to something else I was saying, that there's an answer to this in terms of good financial advice that fits your risk profile, but there isn't an existential answer to this. There isn't a philosophical answer to it, right? At some point, if you want to take some gamble on choosing gratification now and risking not having enough money later on. You are just going to have to take that risk. There's not a way of getting around that trade-off. And if you are someone who is so terrified by that prospect, then maybe it's worth it not to have the enjoyable experiences in the present. But again, it's just this question. There's a line in the book from a therapist called Sheldon Kopp that I quote, which says, you're free to do whatever you want. You need only face the consequences. And this hit me like a lightning bolt when I first heard it, because it's like, right, you can do the most amazingly fun things with your money now, and then there's a consequence, or you can do nothing amazing with it now and except be very judicious with it, and then there's a different consequence. And you're not going to be able to get away from consequences. So the question is, what balance of consequences will you choose? And I think that's actually, it sounds like I'm maybe like I'm wriggling away from answering the question, but I think that seeing that full context can be amazing, because then that's when people understand instinctively and intuitively, oh yeah, actually I am being a bit too cautious here, actually adjusting the dial one notch in the direction of hedonism would be appropriate for me, and I don't need to worry that I'd suddenly lose total control of myself and dial it all the way and be incredibly stupid. Because if you're worried about that, that's a guarantee that you're not that kind of person who's at risk of that. So it's all an adjustment of dials and an understanding that if you maximize one thing, you're going to have to bear the consequences with something else.
Yeah. It is a fascinating question, and I think you're absolutely right. There are people who live, with frugality, and I think the observance that I continually will try and educate maybe a 65-year-old comparable to just the experience I've had of an 85-year-old is, 85-year-olds don't want to do what 65-year-olds want to do. Mostly.
Right.
Mostly. I'm not saying that still don't want community and they want family and they want connection, etc. But I see less 85-year-olds wanting to go backpacking through Vietnam. But I do see 65-year-olds wanting to do it. And therefore just understanding that if we are successful to get to 4,000 weeks, mm-hmm. maybe 4,500. If we are successful just through luck or through our own, self-education of looking after ourselves, is just realizing that we're always continually changing. And the 65-year-old and the 85-year-old are different people. What did they say about the Buddhist saying is that it's not the same man walking in the same river, or, you never walk in the river twice or something like that.
Heraclitus, isn't it? You can never step into the same river twice. Yeah, all the same insight anyway. Yes, exactly. Everything changes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So actually, if you feel that you could afford it, go and do it, because I suppose you've still got some memories, haven't you?
Right, and just sort of know your own default tendencies, so that when you push against them, you're doing it from a place of self-awareness. Right? It's like, yeah, I know that I'm the kind of person who's liable to hold back a bit too much from something like that, from, splashing out for something in the present. But a different person listening to this might be like, just look at my life story. I've always splashed out. And actually now I need to push back in a different direction. I think it's that awareness of which side of these consequences and trade-offs you just instinctively go to. For some reason in your childhood, probably, right? Some idea that was the way to safety in life. Some people do grow up with the idea that, you can't trust the world. So if you get £100, you just have to spend that. And other people grow up with the idea that if you put enough of it away, then finally you'll feel okay. And neither of them are quite true, but
no.
It's good to know your own tendencies.
Yes. And actually, I think that's, there's some wisdom there, is actually it's life is not so black and white. It's just versions of grey.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
There's Yeah. Well, it's been fascinating to talk to you. As I say, your new book, Meditations for Mortals, 4 Weeks to Embrace Your Limitations and Finally Make Time for What Counts, comes out in September. Where do people buy it? Where do people find it? Where do they find you? How can they connect with you? All that good stuff.
You can buy it in any format, wherever you buy your books. And if you're hearing this before publication date, pre-orders are so important to authors. You'd be doing me a huge favor if you pre-ordered it in advance. My website is oliverburkeman.com, and you can sign up there for my email newsletter, The Imperfectionist.
Fantastic. Well, we will definitely try and get this out before the publication date so we can get those pre-orders in. So I highly recommend all of Oliver's books. Thoroughly enjoyed chatting to you this afternoon. Once again, thanks so much, Oliver Burkeman.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
A heartfelt thank you to Oliver Burkeman for taking time to join me today. You can find links to Oliver's books and all we discussed today in the show notes wherever you've listened to this episode. If you found this episode helpful, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, as it really does help more people like you find us. And for more interviews and retirement planning videos, you may want to check out my YouTube channel. Just search for The Retirement Cafe with Justin King, or click the link in our show notes. To get in touch with feedback or guest ideas, you can reach me on hello@theretirementcafe.co.uk. So until next time, I'm Justin King, helping you feel more informed in your retirement.